Greetings, my nigh little mosh pit, and Lost Soul Aside at the time of writing this has released to a very mixed reception from the court of public opinion over on sites like Twitter, but it's X now because of fragile egos, and Twitter but for annoying people who are still mad at 43-year-old internet reviewers whose relevancy died a decade ago. Of course, by nature of me discussing this game, it's pretty clear I have my own thoughts on Lost Soul Aside. In case you're only here for the opinion on the game, I'll give you that so you can gleefully leave the video without hearing my greater point. I think it's good. A solid 7 out of 10 action game that feels very in line with its inspirations. That being the original PS3 concept for Final Fantasy Versus 13. If you're someone who has been longing for the days of reliable games with average quality, and are the type to soy jacket or a hype moments, then it's definitely worth your time. Personally, my favorite thing about the game is the fact that it doesn't let you skip cutscenes when viewing them for the first time, which is an excellent way to combat the modern day gamer habit of ignoring the story of a game only to then complain it doesn't make sense. I also like the combat. It's not as responsive as more refined games in the genre like Hi-Fi Rush, but it's not trying to be. It's clearly taking more cues from Kingdom Hearts or Final Fantasy than it is from Devil May Cry. However, that seems to be a lot of people's gripe with the game. Lost Soul Aside is getting a lot of flack, some of it valid like the frankly botched state of the PC port, but let's be honest, PC ports tend to be riskier than console releases due to all the variables that go into play with a PC release compared to consoles, which are more uniform in their specs. However, we are not here to talk about actual problems with the game. Of course not. We're here to debunk falsehoods and laugh at nothing burger complaints. So first off, I'll say this as politely as possible. The stamina bar isn't a problem. Holy shit! Anyway, let's talk about the stamina bar for dodging. There seems to be a big issue for some in the action game character slash fuck 'em up sideways genre community. Look guys, I gotta keep it 100 with you. Sometimes games with good stylish combat want to try to stop you from mashing dodge roll too. It's not automatically a trait exclusive to Souls-likes, since that seems to be a dirty word for all of you now. A lot of the dislike of the stamina bar tends to be from elitists in the community who clutch their pearls at any mechanic that reminds them of Dark Souls. Now listen, I'm not the biggest Souls fan myself, but the borderline obsessive dislike for the subgenre of Souls-likes among stylish action game enjoyers seems just as immature as during the 2010s era when they'd throw a fit over Dynasty Warriors existing. And these tidbits of mine are gonna play a role in my greater point, so stay with me here. Remember what I said about reliable 7 out of 10 games and how Lost Soul Aside fits that mold perfectly? Well, despite saying that earlier, it's actually what I want to focus on with this video. This is not going to be a review of the game as a whole, and more so me not only defending the game from its detractors, but also explaining why I think the negative reception of Lost Soul Aside has actually been proof that gamers aren't actually being honest when they say they want more creative ideas or when they post that god-awful "I want shorter games with worse graphics" meme. Lost Soul Aside, regardless of what you expected, is more in line with Bunjigai, Sword of Etheria, or EOE Eve of Extinction. And once you start playing it with that headspace, the more its good qualities begin to peek through. It's probably one of my favorites of the year so far. I genuinely just think y'all gotta stop going into it expecting it to be the next big KH or FF or DMC or whatever, because that's not the type of game this is, and it was frankly never marketed as such by the developers. Now by the publishers, that's a different story. At most you could critique Sony, again, the publishers, for charging $60 for the game and marketing it like it's a AAA title when it's not, as they're the ones that fall for the price, not the developers. Which I'm only bringing up because of this particular reply I got to a comment I left on the video the Gamers Joint made about this game, which, by the way, not a good video.
And it's certainly not the product that I was envisioning in my head. Create a really competent, solid character hack and slash action game is really hard. This is why we don't tend to see them come out all too often.
This user, James Slits, replied to me basically trying to dismiss my perspective simply by the nature of people should judge it based on its price just like any product, which is in fact their words as shown on screen. And I'm not gonna lie, that mindset feels really gross to me as a creator. This game is a decade-long passion project that had the benefit of a Sony budget given to it. It's rough and messy, sure, but it's a fun time and is clearly a melting pot of Yang Bing's interests and ideas put into one game. And to sit there and call it a product as a way to dismiss my point about meeting the game, this piece of art, on its level, well, it simply reminds me how much gamers don't value this art form that they claim to care about. This is why we don't get AA games as much as we used to. Y'all can't engage with them on their level. People talk a lot about how people need to play more bad games, but I'd like to offer a different mindset. People need to play more 7 out of 10 games, like pure middle-of-the-road goodness in between all the peak and slop, to put it into simple terms. I get it to some degree. You don't want to spend $60 on something you aren't guaranteed to enjoy. But this inability to see the good in something simply because it isn't worth its AAA price, while ignoring the context in which the game was made under, is dehumanizing and shows a severe immaturity with how gamers approach games. This is why great games end up coming out to little fanfare, because so many gamers are just incapable of ever giving chances to stuff that they can't 100% guarantee they'll love. The same people who will say this sort of thing in response to me defending Lost Soulicide are probably the same people who are more than willing to spend $60 or more on some soulless remake like Silent Hill 2 Make or Snake Eater Delta. The same people who will likely buy Ninja Gaiden 4 on release for full price despite all the issues we already know about it, because it's aura and hype, and it's a thing they already know, so it'll be easier for them to ignore its issues because brand name. These people will cry for games as art, or about how companies need to put out new ideas instead of stinky Last of Us games, but then when they do put out those new ideas, they throw a fit and nitpick everything about them unless there's some zombified corpse of something they grew up with. How many of these people are gonna buy something like Full Metal Skullgirl, or Detained Too Cool for School, or Unbeatable when they come out? The answer is probably none of them, unless some clickbait slop tuber tells them that it's the next Kino Peak Cinema game, or it's attached to a franchise they already know, so their nostalgia addict brains can get a dopamine rush because their lives peaked at 12 years old when they played Rayman Free while their parents were going through a recession. Lost Soulicide isn't perfect. I'm not even saying it's worth $60, because it's not. But to sit there and act like the price of the game or the false expectations that you yourself set for the game not being met feels incredibly corporate to me. It feels anti-art. It feels like so many gamers lost sight of what it means to take a chance on a game that, sure, might not be perfect or peak or whatever, but still a great time that you yourself might personally get a lot out of. You know, you, the individual. A game's value shouldn't be judged on its price. It should be judged on what you personally take away from it. If you really believe that games are art, like actually believe it, then you frankly have no reason to disagree with me on that statement. I don't mean to come off as defensive or aggressive, but it really does feel like a lot of the hate Lost Soulicide is getting is due to things like people putting a lot of unfair expectations on the game despite it only having a small development team of, I believe, 25 people. Especially not helped by some of the insane videos I've seen being made about this game. Again, I understand if Lost Soulicide isn't your cup of tea. I'm not saying that disliking the game on its own is anti-art. But to cry foul about the game all because you think it should be judged as a product, all because of a price tag that won't even matter in a year from now when the game's market price goes down like most games tend to do after a year or two of existing, I just don't know. I've been enjoying Lost Soulicide. Like, I've made that very clear during this video. And if you haven't, I get that completely. But all I'm asking is that people judge the game for what it is instead of what it isn't. Because I'm calling it now. In 5 years or so from now, a lot of people will look back on Lost Soulicide as an underrated classic that was a victim of circumstance once they pick it up for $25 or less at a GameStop on clearance. I'm the Girly Wolf Pup. And remember to cherish your 7 out of 10s.